Hey there, this is Phil. Welcome to the podcast. It's the Holy Post podcast. It's the morning after the election. We're doing it the day we're releasing it so we can give you updates. I am here with Christian Taylor.
Hello, you sound a little like
No, I'm great.
wobbly and a little unsteady.
Sky Jitani. Hi, Sky.
Hi.
And we also have Jason Rugg here running the controls. Hi, Jason.
Hey there.
How'd everybody sleep?
Like a baby.
Not
Wait,
well. Not
You
well.
guys slept?
Okay, Jason was up all night. Sky did not sleep well. Christian slept like a baby. Huh. Interesting. Okay, and here's the theme song. What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. Sky and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Christian. Okay, when we said, hey, let's do a podcast right after the election, the morning after, did you immediately think, hey, that's a really good idea? Did anyone think, maybe that's not a good idea?
Oh, I knew it was a bad idea, but I thought it would be fun.
Hold my beer and watch this. Bad ideas that are fun.
Yeah. So I guess most people were saying, there's a pretty good chance we're not going to know.
I knew we wouldn't know.
So why are we so surprised? Why are we so surprised that we don't know?
I think part of the surprise is, I like 538, that website and the podcast,
Yes.
530, they're Nate Silver and all the, they do all the polling.
90% is where they were.
Yeah.
And they just need to pack it up and go home after two.
Yeah, I mean, of course they're going to defend themselves and, we got this all right, just this, that, and the other. But a lot of people thought that because of 2018 and because of the polls, that this was going to be another blue wave and we would know like if Trump didn't win Florida or if he didn't win North Carolina or Ohio, one of those early East time zone states, it would basically be all over. But here we are.
Yeah.
It's clearly not.
Here we are.
Well, I knew for sure it would be this way because that's why I went to bed. I went to bed and I knew we would not even know today. And so I just kind of been chilling, knowing that it's probably going to be 3 days before we know.
Wow.
I don't know if it was the anxiety from the election, if it was the excessive amounts of Chinese food I ate last night, or the fact that I have a new puppy that kept me up. But I did not sleep well.
You've pulled together a nice collection of random elements that could affect you in the middle of the night. Too much Chinese food, a new puppy, and an election.
It's like the 2020 trifecta.
Yeah. So okay. So where we stand as we're recording this, we have no idea who wins, but Michigan and Wisconsin have recently edged towards blue. And if Arizona stays blue, then it looks like Biden could pull it off, right?
Yeah.
I just have one question, though. There's one other thing we don't know, Phil. You did not weigh in on how you slept.
Oh.
And you did not weigh in on how you are.
I did not sleep great, partly because my wife did not sleep well. I need to ask her what her dream was, but she woke up in the middle of the night with a scream. I'm assuming it was election related. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it had something to do with the election. But she screamed in the middle of the night. And of course, it woke me up. It was like at 3:30 in the morning. So then I'm like, okay, what time is it? Do we know? Then I got to grab my phone and I'm looking and I'm drilling down on different states and counties. Like, oh, we still don't know. And it's still a mess. And I got to try to go back to sleep now. So that was not great. It was my wife's fault. I need to ask her what she dreamt about. It'll be one of those bursts. What? Did I wake? I have no idea. I don't remember anything. Like, oh, come on. You screamed and it cost me an hour of frantic scrolling.
I'm dying to hear what she dreamed. You got to figure that out one, Phil.
Yeah, I'll look into it. So, okay, it was not, would you say, Sky, it was not a clear repudiation of Trumpism?
Oh, Claire, you obviously saw my text this morning. Um, yeah, that's one of the big takeaways for me. Regardless of who actually wins, this was not a repudiation of Donald Trump, and that think what you want of it. It does mean a lot for the future of the Republican Party because it did not send the signal, and Republican senators who were on the edge basically won most of their reelection races. So it doesn't look like strong support for Donald Trump cost the Republican Party much, if anything. And
Yeah.
that means Trump, whether we like him or hate him, is here to stay and will be a very influential factor in Republican politics. Even without him as a person, his philosophy,
Right.
his way of operating is not going anywhere.
Right. Just means that we someone would have to summarize what his philosophy is so that they could replicate it.
Well, I think we know what it is. Don't give an inch, never admit wrongdoing,
Okay. So
cause
more
division
his
rather than unity.
ethic. I think of a philosophy as a cohesive
Oh
way
no
of
no no.
looking at things, but his ethic more than anything else. David French, who is going to be on the podcast later, not live. I recorded it last week, so pre-election, but he's going to be on the podcast later to talk more about abortion. Hey, what could possibly go wrong there? It's a great idea, Phil. Thank you. Glad I thought of it. He tweeted this morning that it looks like it's headed in what was his ideal scenario, which was to move on from Trump for the sake of the Republican Party, but retain the Senate for the sake of having breaks on, the more radical impulses of the Democratic Party. So that's
Well,
that's good.
yeah. Another way of spinning it, I think, is the election is not a repudiation of Trumpism, but it's also very clear that America is not on board with the increasingly progressive position of the Democratic Party either.
Right.
And
So,
honestly, I'm
yeah.
kind of okay with that. Like stand with David French in that way. I think the balance of power is super important. So, you know, I'm kind of that mindset myself.
Yeah,
I mean, are
I don't
you?
think that's unless you really, really, really wanted a Green New Deal in the next 12 months, which you're definitely not going to get if the Senate is still red. Yeah, I no, it would you'd assume no big giant things will get done. Whether you think the big giant things are good or bad. So, is it stasis? Do we end up just enshrining stasis for another 4 years, especially with Mitch McConnell back and Lindsey Graham back? And, so if there's a Democrat in the White House, well, meet your new enemies. That they're your old enemies. They're the same enemies of, Barack Obama.
Yeah, but I agree with you guys. But the problem with both of these outcomes is it doesn't force either party to fundamentally rethink itself, right?
That's true.
So I don't like the increasingly progressive stance of the Democratic Party either. I would hope that their failure to really have a blue wave this year or a decisive huge win for Biden or a big takeover of the Senate, like I wish they would sit back and go, hey, maybe we need to moderate ourselves a little bit on some of these left-ish
Right.
issues, but I don't know if they will. And same thing with the Republican Party. If they had been just decimated, they'd have to really rethink their Trumpism stuff. And this is such an indecisive outcome that it basically leaves both parties where they were, and that's not good. I think I would have preferred one side or the other just getting absolutely decimated. And I know it sounds weird. I actually would have preferred a slam dunk for Republicans and Trump because it would have forced the Democrats to rethink their posture, or the other way, if it was a huge blue wave, it would have forced the Republicans to rethink their extremism. But as it
Yeah.
stands, neither party, I think, is going to really rethink where they are.
But you don't
That's
think
a good
that.
point.
Yeah, but there's already a lot of hand wringing in the Democratic Party over what happened in Miami-Dade County.
Yes.
Why are Latinos, not with us anymore in the same way they were just 4 years ago? So that's something, and that was another one of my questions, is because I saw a few commentators say, okay, the Black Lives Matter protests, in southern Florida that included references to Marxism are really not a good way to appeal to Cuban voters.
Mm-hmm.
So, did I just wonder if there's an autopsy where they say, "Wow, the Black Lives Matter organization and its founders who came out and saying, by the way, we're trained Marxists, may have cost us Florida."
Well, it may be that, but it's also the fact that Bernie Sanders is a socialist. He's a Democratic socialist, and he ran and did very well the last two primaries in the Democratic Party. A Democratic socialist is never going to be in the running in the Republican Party. So just
Right.
from a 30,000 foot level, the Democratic Party is the more left leaning, more welcoming party for those with socialist leanings. And that's going to freak out people from Cuban heritage or Venezuelan heritage or other
Right.
Latin American countries where Marxism and socialism have done terrible things. And, the Latino vote is not monolithic. It's different in
Right.
Arizona and Texas than it is in Florida. But yeah, that's a big problem. And I do wonder if I've just had my nose in a lot of immigration history right now because I'm working on another script for a video. But I do wonder if we are seeing the early stages of Latino Americans being broadly accepted as white.
Mm.
Because we've seen that in the past where Roman Catholics were not considered white when they came to this country in the early 20th century. Jews were not considered white when they came to this country. Eastern and Southern Europeans were not considered white when they came to this country. And up until recently, Latinos have not been considered white, I'm using air quotes, in demographic studies and voting trends, things like that. But if more and more of them do move toward the Republican Party and some of the values of that party, we might see them broadly accepted as white and less turned off by some of the race baiting, dog whistling that goes on from people like Trump. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but Miami-Dade makes me wonder that could be an emerging trend here.
I have a solution to solving all of our racial and ethnic issues in America that I just thought of.
Well, let's hear it.
Let's just reclassify everyone as white.
Yeah, I'm sure a bunch of people will be happy with that, Phil.
If everyone is white, there's nothing to argue about. Where's my Nobel? I think I solved the problem. So many people have been not white and then became classified later as white. Why don't we just keep doing it with everyone?
I think
Okay,
that
sorry.
I know where your heart is coming from. I just don't want you to be misunderstood. So I'm going to clarify what you're saying. You are not saying that everyone should be white, but that us white people
That's not
should
what I said.
classify everyone of I know. That's why I'm clarifying.
Yeah.
You want to just make sure that everybody is classified that way.
We only have one classification, or we just classify everyone as human. Maybe that's a better way to do it, and then we can't divide them up into little boxes and say, why do you people vote differently than us? Yes. Sky.
Can we talk about 2016 for a second?
Oh, okay. We have to talk about 2016?
Am I frozen? I hate being frozen.
No.
Please don't freeze me.
No, you're not. But your connection isn't always reliable, Sky.
I think he's kind of frozen now. And while he is, I do want to say, until Sky said what he said, I couldn't identify the despondency that I've been feeling today. So I've been feeling this just kind of despondency. And I think it's what Sky was articulating. It's that we're sort of right back where we started. There is no real change that's going to happen from this, I think. We're just going to be stuck, no matter who wins over the next 4 years, in this gridlock. And I do think you're right, Sky. If one side or the other had a big slam dunk, the other side would have been forced to change. And that's what I'm sad about in the Republican Party, in that it's not the party that I recognized. And I would like to feel more at home in that conservative party, but I just don't.
Sorry, guys, I got frozen for a minute.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're unfrozen. You've been thawed, so you can speak to us again.
Just like Steve Rogers. 2016. Can we talk about 2016? I know that sounds weird, but I think that one of the big takeaways I've had so far from what happened yesterday is it's completely changed the way I view 2016.
Oh, so tell us more about that.
I know. Isn't this interesting? So a lot of people, and including myself, had a theory that 2016, the Trump victory wasn't really a Trump victory. It was more of a Hillary defeat,
Oh yeah.
right? Because there were just the numbers showed typically Democratic voters did not come out for Hillary Clinton the way they had for Barack Obama 12 years earlier. African Americans didn't come out for her the way they did for Barack Obama. More left-leaning Democratic voters didn't like her. They wanted Bernie Sanders. They voted third party, or they just sat at home and didn't vote for her. So her votes were
Right.
down in 2016, which gave the possibility for Trump to come in and win. So the assumption was, and part of it, she's just such an odious candidate. Like, she had very high negative numbers. Joe Biden comes in. He has pretty good approval numbers. He's not negative in most people's views. He's not seen as corrupt and as extreme as Hillary was. He didn't have all the baggage that she did. There's probably some sexism going on there in 2016 against Hillary. So a lot of people thought if Trump's voters who supported him in 2016 come back and vote for him again in 2020, but Biden sees an uptick in Democratic voters, just the people who typically voted Democrat but sat out in 2016, then he would easily walk away with the win. But what we saw last night and into today is something very different. It isn't just that Trump's voters came back to support him again in 2016, but he grew his vote significantly,
Right.
which means I think we need to reinterpret what happened in 2016. It wasn't that people were voting against Hillary. There's a significant portion of this country, 40, 45, 48% of this country, which actually really, really likes Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, have you seen all the trucks and the boats? Trucks
Yeah.
and boats love Donald Trump.
I know. Well,
They
then it's
do.
hard to, anecdotally, it's hard when you see that stuff to go, okay, yeah, there's some passion around Donald Trump, but how big is it? And I think what
Right.
we've seen here is Trump's win in 2016 was not a freak event. There's something about him and his personality and his rhetoric that a lot of Americans really, really, really support. And that, you can either feel great about that or it can make your stomach churn. But this is not just people weren't excited about Hillary.
Well, here's
But what
go ahead, Christian.
I was just going to say, well, what do you think that means then about the heart and the soul of America?
I don't know if I want to say anything about that, but it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. The fact that, and it's not just about party, because we didn't see this kind of excitement for Mitt Romney or John McCain, right? It isn't just about party. It's about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Especially since he's not in favor of things like not growing the national debt that are Republican orthodoxy for generations. So he's so not Republican that the fact that he's more popular than the Republicans says, "Oh, this is a new thing. This is not. Wow, the Republican Party is really doing well. This is a new thing that is living in the Republican Party." Obviously that makes, when it looked fairly certain that he was going to lose, a couple of weeks ago, Republican senators like Ben Sass were actively distancing themselves just to say, hey, just so you know, I wasn't really on board this the whole time, to position themselves to actually try to restore the Republican Party to republicanism. And now, if Trump pulls this out and wins, guys like Ben Sass are in a pretty awkward position.
Yeah.
That they've
Very.
distanced themselves from their own party's president. Here's what I wanted to say, though. Okay, can I say what I wanted to say?
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Okay. I have people in my family, extended family, that are very, very pro-Trump and very, very anti-Trump. Now, they tend to live in the areas you would predict, bright red areas or bright blue areas. We are all connected on Facebook, so we see what each other is posting. So when people post from blue areas, here's why I cannot vote for Trump. And then when people, and they're all Christians, by the way, and then people post from red areas, here's why I am so excited to vote for Trump. The lists are completely different, like from different universes, like different realities. The list of, so I'll read one of these from a red part of my family that says, this is all the great things Trump has done. I think, wow, that's a compelling list. Now Israel is usually pretty big in there. So depending on how big a factor that is, kind of depends on the role modern Israel plays in your own personal eschatology. But then I read from my relatives in the blue parts of the country, and you think, wow, what a horrible guy! How could anyone ever vote for this guy? So I don't even. I'm bumping into a lot of people who just say, I can't. Sure, his tweets can be rude, but what other bad thing has he ever done? Whatever. And then when you read their summary of his 4 years, you kind of say, oh, I see where you don't think he's done anything bad and he's done nothing but good. And then you read the summary that comes from a family member in a blue part of the country, and it's the exact reverse. He hasn't done a single good thing. And how could you possibly? So I don't know that anyone. So that's why this morning, Eric Metaxas is tweeting every 3 seconds about how the Democrats are actively in the process of stealing the election, because there's no other possible explanation for how all of America wouldn't vote for Trump other than theft by radical leftists, and why people on the other side are lamenting, like, what? Are people blind? Are they all racist? What's going on?
There's a lot there. I think you're putting your finger on the reality, Phil, that we live in different universes, and probably different media universes have a lot to do with that. But when I find somebody saying that kind of stuff online, what I want to say to them, I don't, but what I want to say to them is, can you name one former Trump cabinet secretary who is actively supporting the president? Whether it's Jeff Stevens from the Justice Department, Mattis from Defense, Tillerson from the State Department, his own former chief of staff, John Kelly, go on down the list of really reputable, admirable, respected in varying degrees Republican leaders who worked for this man, and they have all come out against him.
Sarah Huckabee?
She wasn't a cabinet secretary. She was just a press secretary. But like somebody who actually worked in a department of the government, who was responsible for administering this government in some way, who worked directly for Donald Trump, who says he should be put back in office. The mustache guy, what's his name?
Bolton.
On and on and on. So it's like, okay, I know what you're hearing about Trump from your limited media perspective, but look at the people who knew him and worked with him closest, who are from your own party, and they won't support him. That should be a big red flag.
They're never Trumpers.
They worked for him.
I know, but they were never Trumpers. Secretly,
can I say
never Trumpers? Yes, Christian.
So I also know your family, Phil, on both sides, and the different red and blue parts of it. And what characterizes your family is they all love Jesus. And I mean, I've met them and know them, and they really are Bible-believing Christians who love the Lord. And it reminds me of what Tim Dalrymple wrote last week in Christianity Today. That was a super helpful article for me to understand, and helped me reframe the way that I think about the Christians that are different, believe differently than I do. And he talked about there being sort of this new movement. And he described both of those camps very clearly. And I think it's helpful. I mean, I don't know what you guys think. What did you guys think about that article?
Yeah, he divided the two camps. He described them as the church regnant and the church remnant.
Yeah, I didn't know what regnant means.
I had to look that up. It's a derivative of reigning.
Yeah,
the church that wants to reign on earth, and the church that is a remnant of, that gives up power. It's really whether you seek power or you give up power was the distinction.
Whether you dominate the culture or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do see differences in the Christian church globally as to whether or not that's a wise or an unwise thing. So I guess if you boil it down, That is what it comes down to. Do we as Christians believe that we should work within our power structures, control our power structures to enact what we feel is righteous and just, or not?
Yeah, there's such a clear case. Even if you read some of the things we've read from Wayne Grudem or Al Mohler, such a clear case of religious liberty, abortion, LGBT issues. So the way we believe society should be structured. We don't like Donald Trump, but he is structuring society the way we think it should be structured. And that is so overwhelmingly important that we will ignore, everything else. And yeah, Sky.
Well, Christian, I want to kind of correct something you just said. I don't think what Tim Dalrymple's argument was is that some Christians think we should be using the power structures to enact what we think are righteous laws. I think everyone would agree with that. The difference is one side wants to do that by excluding everyone else in society from having access to those power structures, whereas the church remnant would say we need to cooperate and work alongside non-Christians and this diverse culture and share power, all the while advocating still in the public square for what we believe in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
side says
And
the church should just dominate, period, and no one else should be allowed the power. And the other side says, no, we're one of many factions in this country. We need to share power and surrender it at times and work alongside and cooperate with people who think differently than us.
But
That's
I
the
mean, if
difference.
you think, here's what's so confusing to me about that. When you look back all the way to Acts and you look at how the Christians were in culture, that was not the model that Christians were in that culture at the
Well,
time.
yeah, but they weren't in a representative democracy with enough numbers to actually potentially be able to take over the
That's a good point.
representative
Well,
democracy.
and
So it wasn't even an option to try to be the church regnant.
And Phil, you've talked about this before, like the difference between the way Mormons have kind of responded to the Trump reality and evangelicals have. Whereas evangelicals, there was a time when they had a lot of power in society and they feel it slipping away. And so they want to reach back
Right. Well,
and retain it.
it's like the black church. You don't resent losing power you never had.
Right.
Doesn't create the same emotional response. So you're really looking for, how can we use our advocacy to do the best we can for people who don't have a voice, rather than, we liked it better when we were in charge of everything. How do we? And I just watched a piece from, I don't know, it was, Kirk Cameron was on it, and Charlie Kirk was on it. It was some faith take back America thing, and it was all about, this was the intent of the founders. The intent of the founders was that we would be a moral Christian Bible based nation. And now we have people that are trying to make it not that, and they must be stopped. And and that's a very specific worldview. We need to talk more about Christian nationalism, because there's Christian nationalism in there, obviously. But the notion that the church needs to use political power to hold America to a set of values that we believe was the original intention that should be enforced today. It's kind of like, is America, like we look at the Constitution, is America a living document that changes as its demographics change? Or, is it originalist and it's supposed to be what it was supposed to be, even if demographics change and people don't want it to be that anymore? And we need to try to force it back into what it was supposed to be.
So earlier, Phil, related to that, you said that because of the structural changes or values that people associate with Trump, or at least conservative Republican administrations, they're willing to put up with his less appealing qualities, right? It's
Yes.
that's where I think,
Cyrus.
right, but that's what I think this election has shown isn't the case. The argument in 2016 from a lot of conservative Christians was, well, I held my nose and voted for Trump, right? Because of judges, because of abortion, or because of religious liberty, whatever it is. And I think what we have seen with
Why do you think that's not the case this time?
because he
There,
didn't just it wasn't just that he maintained those voters, he grew them. significantly.
Right.
And
But who did he grow? Because we don't really know that. He could have grown people that are just really happy that their taxes were cut, or
well, but
that really resent
hold on a
the
second.
shutdown of their state by their Democratic governor.
This is the same problem I had with people who were defending Trump during the impeachment for these same reasons. Like, we got to keep Trump because of abortion or religious liberty, whatever. It's like, well, what would a President Pence really have changed any of those things?
No,
So
he would not.
I think what 2020 has shown us is a lot of people who say they hold their nose and vote for Trump, in reality, when they go into the voting booth, they take a big, deep whiff. Man, they like it. Like, they like it. It's not just that they're holding their nose and I can't stand this guy, but I'm going to put up with him because of these other things. I think what we've seen is there is a strong, strong affinity for what he is shoveling. And it's I mean, I no doubt there are some who do hold their nose and vote for this guy, but I think it's a lot smaller than we've been led to believe.
Send your
Well, and
letters and emails to Sky Jitani.
I do know a lot of people who did say they were going to hold their nose and vote for Trump this time. But I know actually more people that said, I am not voting for either. I'm either going to write in someone or I'm just not going to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And those are
Mm-hmm.
usually Christians and people that live, well,
Mm-hmm.
some live in red states, some live in blue. But
Okay. We gotta wrap this up because we have David French coming up to talk about abortion again. But what do you think this means for the church? It is clear that the white evangelical church did not, in any significant way, rethink their commitment to Donald Trump.
I think it continues the cultural alienation and loss of the younger generation.
I agree.
Mm.
And it really hurts my heart. That's about all I can say. You know, I do want to say this one thing. This morning in my quiet time, I was reading Romans 8. And if you have not read Romans 8 in a long time, I strongly recommend you go back and read it. And I particularly appreciated it in the message version because it shakes things up a little bit. It makes you think about the language a little differently. And I found a lot of comfort in Romans 8. And, I'm sure there are people out there that feel despondent like I do, regardless. Our peace and our comfort and our joy is not found out, here on earth. It's just not going to be. So we just, I think,
Mm-hmm.
need to accept where we are and praise the Lord in spite of it.
Where we are is where we are. Yeah, well, and I was going to tweet this yesterday, but I never did. Basically, if Biden wins, the church needs to vocally advocate for the unborn and for religious liberty. If Trump wins, the church needs to vocally advocate for the immigrants, the refugee, the poor, and civility. And honesty. The only common denominator is the church needs to continue being the church. There is no, if this candidate wins, we're off the hook. No, we're on the hook. We're still on the hook either way. And, and we can't hide because someone was, I forget who it was talking about how many younger Christians are so repulsed by Trumpism that they're uncritically embracing progressivism.
Yeah.
And they're just turning into, as partisan on the Democratic side as their elders, their parents or grandparents are on the Republican side. And that's not a solution either. We're in both cases, we're putting too much trust in these party platforms that are put together largely by special interest groups and not by biblical consideration. So we have to hold to biblical consideration, and then we have to do our best to advocate for, particularly for whoever the parties, the peoples in power are failing to advocate for. But also, we need to care about everything. We need to care about the unborn. We need to care about the refugees that are stuck, across the border in refugee camps, asylum seekers, because we won't let them seek asylum anymore. We need to advocate for immigrants that are being demonized as, rapists and criminals. We need to advocate for everybody. We need to advocate for religious liberty and freedom of speech and freedom of conscience in all situations. We have a lot to advocate for, and we don't get off the hook just because one guy or the other guy won an election.
In other words,
Amen.
the church needs to be prophetic rather than partisan.
Oh,
Speak
that's good. You should write
That
something
is
about
very good. We should have a quote graphic about that. And speaking of what Sky says, I want to thank you for your devotion this morning. I thought it was very apt. And if you guys have not subscribed to Sky's devotional, I would strongly recommend it. And I want to share, if you don't mind, Phil, I want to share his prayer that's at the end of his
that.
devotional
Sure.
this week because it addresses the church and how we should be. And this is from William Laud from 1573 to 1645 is when he was alive. Most gracious Father, we most humbly beseech you for your holy church. Fill it with all truth, in all truth, and with all peace. Where it is corrupt, purge it. Where it is an error, direct it. Where anything is amiss, reform it. Where it is right, strengthen and confirm it. Where it is in need, furnish it. Where it is divided and torn apart, make up its breaches, O Holy One of Israel.
Amen. Aren't breeches pants?
Yeah, when they're torn apart, you want them mended.
Make up,
It's true.
Heavenly Father, make up my britches. Okay. I am about to sit down with David French, who wrote a piece challenging some of the conventional wisdom about reducing abortions, which inspired Sky to write a piece about that. And then we turned it into a video, and then the whole world got mad at me. The world got mad at me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I asked David if he would come back on just to defend himself. What do you mean by this? And we have a lively conversation, very fun conversation about some of the realities of his thinking on abortion and how we can actually reduce abortion rates. So hang on for that. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Hey, this is Phil. I am here with David French. Who is David French, you ask? Well, you should know who he is, but he's an attorney, political commentator, author, fellow at the National Review Institute, former staff writer for National Review, currently senior editor of The Dispatch, which is, how do you describe The Dispatch these days?
We are describing it as fact-based reporting and analysis, and where our goal is to press pause on the hot takes and outrage clicks and try to figure out what is really going on.
Wow, what is really going on? Can you summarize it in a sentence?
I was hoping you could tell me.
Well, clearly, the America is about to come to an end. I've heard that regardless of who is elected, it is the end of America. So
yeah, that much is true. We're in the last days of our democracy.
So there you go. We are recording this, by the way, 5 days before the election. It probably won't come out till after the election. So I guess America will be over. As you're hearing, if you can hear the sound of my voice, maybe America didn't end.
Maybe, or it could be you're listening to the podcast and straining to hear it over the sound of screaming and flames as the society lapses into some version of like Panem from the Hunger Games.
So I thank you for using what's left of your phone battery to listen to us instead of calling for help. That really...
Well, and they had to have pre-downloaded it because the grid is down by now, like the cell grid.
Yeah, the grid is down. Okay, so David French got me in trouble, and I'm a little upset about this. It was none of my doing. David French wrote a piece about abortion and whether it should really be the single issue that shapes how Christians vote. And then Sky Jitani, my co-host, said, "Oh, what an interesting piece. I'm going to tweet something about that." And then someone said, "Hey, turn that into a video." And so Sky said, "I'm going to turn that into a video." And then Phil put an intro on the front. And now everyone's mad at Phil.
Yeah.
The video is being called a make-believe VeggieTales video. That was one commentator.
Yeah. No, I thought it was a good video.
What do you have to say for yourself,
I thought it was a good video. I mean, it quoted a pretty good piece, I thought. And, I mean, look, let's just sort of back up a bit here.
Yeah.
Okay, Sky wants Roe versus Wade overturned. I want Roe versus Wade overturned.
Mm-hmm.
This guy doesn't want...
The guy on the front of the video also does. Not that it matters because he didn't write the video, so he's not even
exactly.
involved.
Not that you have anything to do with it.
Nothing. I had nothing to do with it.
Nothing. I mean, it's just like all you did was basically the equivalent of Twitter allowing a tweet to be tweeted.
That's it. I was the gatekeeper that didn't say no.
Yes. So we all want Roe versus Wade overturned. None of us want public funding for abortion. None of us want the Hyde Amendment reversed. What I was trying to do was take a look at what, after we have now had almost 50 years of legal and political and cultural advocacy surrounding the abortion question and the abortion issue. And what I was trying to do is trying to measure how important was any given presidential election to the almost 50-year quest to end abortion in the United States. How important was any given presidential election? Because we're not coming at this as if this is the first election since Roe v. Wade. We now have many elections since Roe v. Wade. We have an incredible amount of data. And really the question was, and the way I phrased it was, if you do not support Trump, do you have, quote, blood on your hands, which is the accusation I got a ton. And what the data tells us is that the abortion rate and the abortion ratio, the difference between abortion rate is rate of abortions per 1,000 women, ratio is rate of abortions per 1,000 pregnancies, has decreased steadily under both Republican and Democratic presidents. It has decreased whether the president has been pro-life or has been pro-choice. And sometimes it has decreased even more when the president is a Democrat than when the previous president was a Republican. So what that tells us is it tells us something really important about what the actual products of our activity and activism. So what it tells us is that the presidential elections have not been materially important to the number of abortions in the United States of America. And that
okay, David.
Yes.
David, I have to push back on you because I've had quite a few people pushing back on me. And
go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't even have anything to do with this. Just the Hyde Amendment, Mexico City policy, both of those things, the president influences them. We assume they both reduce abortion. Democratic administrations, there goes the Hyde Amendment and the Mexico City policy.
Okay, so the Mexico City policy is, is something, whether it has an empirical effect on abortions or not outside the United States, a measurable effect compared to all other factors of impacting abortion across the United States. I mean, outside the United States, I don't know. That was outside the scope of my piece. My piece was talking about the United States of America. Regarding the Hyde Amendment, it is the best possible guess is that if the Hyde Amendment is repealed and there is direct federal funding of abortions, it would increase the number of abortions in the United States. Would it be an increase sufficient to offset the continual year-by-year decrease? Don't know. However, merely electing Joe Biden does not repeal the Hyde Amendment. He would have to have a majority of the House and the Senate, and of course, he would have to sign that into law, and it would have to be not just a Democratic majority of the House of the Senate, but a Democratic majority supporting repeal of the Hyde Amendment. And that is, so if you're saying Joe Biden will repeal the Hyde Amendment, that's not quite accurate. For example, one of the things that I've urged is I would like to see people not vote for Donald Trump, but vote for a Republican Senate for the very reason, one of the key reasons being blocking any sort of repeal of the Hyde Amendment.
Gotcha.
The Hyde Amendment has been around for now almost 50 years. Could it be repealed? Possibly. Will it be immediately repealed if Joe Biden is president and that's the only change that occurs in our governance? No. Okay. So we have to be really precise about what will or will not repeal the Hyde Amendment.
Right. Okay. But won't a Democratic administration result in some of these local and state abortion restrictions getting knocked down? Some of them that are doing good, like in Texas, don't some of those start to just get challenged more and more?
Well, it depends on how the composition of the judiciary changes over time, not immediately, over time. So What we saw, for example, in the height of the Obama administration was passage of more state pro-life laws than any period since Roe. Mm-hmm. Now, keep in mind, this is when Americans, a lot of conservatives were saying, we conservatives never win anything. Well, in fact, you won a lot. You won about, because of the conservative reaction to Obama, you won about 1,000 state House and Senate, state House and Senate seats over the course of the Obama administration. And that led to a wave of pro-life state litigation that chipped at the edges of abortion. And these are all laws that were passed during the Obama administration. Some of them challenged, some of them not challenged. But what's important is that the state elections were far more important to the state of law regarding the issue of life than were the federal elections. And interestingly enough, now this is going to be this issue, because one of the things you have to realize is about everyone who says something about this that is super simplistic just is wrong. Mm-hmm. Just is wrong.
You find the super simplistic answer is not necessarily the right answer?
Right.
As a principle?
So think about it like this. If Donald Trump won in 2016, but then in the off year in 2018, there were some changes of control. It's sort of this blue wave reaction against Donald Trump in state legislatures and in state governors' mansions. In concrete terms, at the state level, moving a state from red to blue is far more consequential to the state of abortion law than the White House moving from red to blue. As a general rule, if we're going to talk about what impacts the actual laws that govern people in this country, govern abortion in this country, that state government is far more important than the federal government. Now, people say, well, what about the judges and the judges who are going to uphold or overturn these laws? Well, yeah, that's certainly a valid concern. But the underlying structure of abortion law right now is laid down in this case called Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And this was a case decided in the early 1990s, 92, I believe.
Yeah.
And it basically said, here is the standard that a law restricting abortion will be struck down if it constitutes a, quote, undue burden on the right of abortion, an undue burden.
Which is a little vague.
Which is pretty vague. But that is the law that kind of reaffirmed the fundamental holding of Roe, that the abortion right was protected under the U.S. Constitution. That's that fundamental holding that I think is flawed. Trivia question. How many justices on the Supreme Court right now have gone on record as saying, in their capacity and in their career as justices of the Supreme Court, as saying that Casey should be overturned, of the 9?
If I know the answer, should I answer?
You should.
One, and it was Clarence Thomas.
One, and it was Clarence Thomas. So,
who was also the longest-serving justice and may not be there a whole lot longer.
So if you think that Roe is on the verge of being overturned right now, you're thinking that without any real basis. You sort of have a faith-based view that might occur, but you don't have any real basis in the actual jurisprudence of the justices sitting on the court. And in fact, Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh both voted in the case called June Medical Services in this last term to apply a version of the Casey standard to a Louisiana admitting privileges law. So the prospect of a sudden and revolutionary change in abortion jurisprudence there's not a lot of prospect for it, to be honest.
So David, why do people get so upset when you bring that up, when you say that? Why do people get so upset when you say it's probably not going to happen? Let's put less emphasis on trying to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Well, there's a range of reasons, to be honest. So some people in absolute full-on good faith have been convinced that Roe is on the verge of being overturned, that if Roe is overturned, it's going to shatter abortion in the United States of America, that there is a direct correlation between who you vote for and the abortion rate in this country. And so quite literally, when they hear this counter argument, they believe that what you're doing is, they'll just disbelieve it. They just disbelieve it and say that what you're doing is just, it's you're some version of lying or some version of fake news or some version of misinformation. I think the better counter argument to my position is that, okay, well, it's very important for Christians to decide that with their vote, they want to, even if they can't end abortion, even if they can't really affect the abortion rate necessarily in a material way with their vote for president, there's still a very important, excuse me, there's still very important decisions to be made regarding protections for conscience regarding abortion. Are you going to, is the administration going to do whatever is limited in its power to impede the abortion on demand regime, or in some ways incentivize or accelerate the abortion on demand regime? That these are important moral and political and cultural questions, to which I say, yes, you are absolutely correct. They're absolutely correct that these are important moral and political considerations and should be a factor in your vote. What I'm saying is they're not the only factor in your vote.
Right.
Not the only factor. And
what do you do? Because I've had, even back when I was, talking about race, and someone said, wow, you're just making people mad. Look at your Facebook page. People are just arguing. That's not Christian. And then I would say, well, okay, well, what about abortion? Can we talk about that, even if it makes people mad that we're against abortion? Because they're still arguing, and the response was, I can't believe that you're putting those two things in the same category of racism, and abortion, that abortion is a sin of such a higher order than racism, or how we treat immigrants or refugees. It is that we have to kind of push all those other issues down to almost political irrelevance until, and I always wonder, until what? Until there are no abortions in America, or just until we can all say, well, technically it's illegal, even though it still happens.
Even though it's happening all over the place. So there's a few responses to that. And my response to your last question was charitable. Can this response be cynical?
Let me ask. I need to pray about it. Give me a second. Okay. It's just a little bit cynical. It's okay.
Okay. So this is not my first rodeo in the pro-life world. I founded what I think with two other friends, I founded what I think is the first independent pro-life student club at Harvard Law School back in 1992. I've been a pro-life litigator for 20 plus years. I've helped raise tens of millions of dollars for pro-life causes. I've been in the battle for life for a long time.
And when did the dark side get to you and turn you? When did that happen?
It has never gotten to me. I'm equally as committed to ending abortion in the United States as I was when I founded the Society for Law, Life, and Religion at Harvard in 1992, driving around a Chevy Nova in Cambridge, Massachusetts that had a bumper sticker on it that said, "Abortion stops a beating heart." So I'm equally as committed.
Okay. You still have the Nova?
No. And that actually died a terrible death in Cambridge. But
like your soul.
Here's what I can tell you. Most of the people who are filling Facebook pages and Twitter feeds with all of these arguments that say abortion is murder and genocide on a scale that matches slavery, that matches all these other
Holocaust,
world historic atrocities, do not believe what they are saying. They do not. And I don't care how much hate I get on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. It is absolutely true. You are using a rhetorical weapon. You are not speaking out of true conviction. How do I know this? Because your actions do not match your words. If this was slavery in your mind, okay? If this was genocide in your mind, why is the local crisis pregnancy center struggling to raise money? Why is it often struggling to have volunteers? Why is that? I'll tell you why. You don't believe it. It's a rhetorical club, and there's one way you convince me you're wrong, by putting your money and your actions where your mouth is. That's how you convince me you're wrong. Your tweets will not do it. Your Facebook hate will not do it. So that's, that's my position on that, Phil.
Would you say you've always been good at getting people to like you, just as a general something you've learned late in life?
I mean, look, here's the funny
like
thing.
You, David.
Well, thank you. Here's the funny thing. I grew up in a very fundamentalist church, and I can remember growing up in a Christian community that says, here are the people that we like. We like the people who tell it like it is. We like the people who speak truth without fear. And what they typically mean is we like the people who tell those other people like it is.
Right.
And we like the people who speak truth to those other people. And, what we found in this Christian community is that when people's actions don't match their expressed values, the absolute last thing they want to hear is that exact message. That is the absolute last thing they want to hear. Now, some people hear it and their conscience is pricked. And by the way, let me just say this. God protect me from a hard heart. If my actions don't match my values, I pray that someone will speak that into my life, including maybe in a Twitter comment, a Twitter blast, or a Facebook comment, and show me where my actions don't match. Because every time you're going to argue that somebody's actions don't match their values, we should be fully cognizant that we're putting a target on our own selves.
Right.
And so we have to be open to correction on the same terms that we're seeking to, apply those principles to others. So that has to be absolutely clear. But the bottom line is, look, tweeting and Facebooking aren't really significant actions for the defense of life. And that vote you are going to press, that you've already pressed, or that button you've maybe already pressed, or that bubble you've already filled in, or that button you're going to press on November 3rd is not, and should not be the most important thing you do for life.
Yeah.
Not by a long shot.
Hey everyone, before we wrap up today, I just want to share our gratitude for how much you have encouraged us in the last couple of weeks. As the pandemic has raged on, as the election has gotten more divisive, as 2020 has just been kind of crazy, we've really, really appreciated the encouraging support that you have expressed to me and Phil and Christian and everyone connected to the Holy Post. In recent weeks, we've seen our listenership grow, we've seen Patreon support grow, we've seen a lot of great messages coming through our social media feeds and email, and frankly, at a time when a lot of Christians can be pretty negative and harsh toward those who are calling us to faithfulness in Christ and love of neighbor, we really appreciate the encouragement that you've given us. It means a lot. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing the Holy Post with your friends and family and in your community. And for those of you who have found this podcast and our resources to be a source of hope and encouragement, well, we're glad you found a home here. So keep sharing it. Let's keep growing this audience. Let's keep sharing this idea that it's possible to be a faithful Christian following Jesus Christ in a pluralistic culture without having to resort to fear or anger. Remember, you can engage with us and other Holy Post listeners by going to holypost.com, and we will see you next week.
The Holy Post Podcast is a production of Phil Vischer Enterprises, that's Phil's company, and Sky Pilot Media, that's Sky's company. Production assistance by Julie Betcher. Editing by Jason Rugg. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by supporting us at patreon.com/Holy Post. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, and more.